Good morning, Member Crescenti. Can we go ahead and do an audio and visual check, please? Good morning, Member Crescenti. I'm able to see you. We'll just need you to
Good
unmute.
morning.
Perfect. Good morning. We can hear you as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. Good morning. My name is Councillor Stephen Holliday. I'm the chair of the Service Excellence Committee. The clerk has advised me that we have quorum. So I'd like to now call our meeting to order. Welcome, everyone. Today's meeting is being held by video conference and in person at City Hall in Committee Room 2. This meeting is also being live streamed online at youtube.com/Toronto City Council Live. Although we may be meeting in different locations today, the committee would like to acknowledge that the land we are meeting on is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. If you are registered to speak at today's meeting, and we do have some speakers registered, please listen for me to call your name. I will call speakers in the order that they appear on the list. The list of speakers can be viewed online by visiting the Service Excellence Committee page at toronto.ca/council and clicking the speakers box for today's meeting. Members, the City Clerk has provided all agenda materials on toronto.ca/council and on the CMP, the Clerk's Meeting portal. I also want to remind you to please submit and approve your motions by email. Staff are available at svexc@toronto.ca to help with motions. Are there any declarations of interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act? If you do have an interest, please raise your hand and unmute your mic. I do not see any, so we will proceed. May I have a motion to confirm the minutes from our last meeting on November 5th, 2024? Yeah, I guess that's a challenge, Mr. Clerk. So I'll move that. All those in favor? Any opposed? And that is carried. And I'll take a moment to acknowledge all of the new members and welcome them to the Service Excellence Committee. Members, we have 3 items today. The first item, actually, and I'm going to propose that we reorder them with purpose, but we'll go through them. The first item is SE 7.1, which is the Customer Experience Division Annual Report 2024. We have a speaker registered for that item, so I will hold it in my name. The second item is SE 7.2, Public Reporting of Performance and Service Standards. We have 2 speakers registered for that item, so I'll hold that in my name. And the third item is SE 7.3, which is a presentation on the Service Excellence Committee's mandate. That item requires a motion to be added as new business. May I have that motion? Councillor Fletcher moves to add as new business. All those in favor? Any opposed? And that carries. Members, with your consent, I'm going to propose that we reorder the agenda to place SE 7.3, the presentation on the Service Excellence Committee mandate, as the first item of business today. Being an introductory presentation, I thought it fitting that it begin at the top of the agenda. So if there's no objection to that, we will go to item SE 7.3. presentation on the Service Excellence Committee's mandate, and we'll just take a moment to do a changeover in the room and allow our presenters to go to the front of the room and get ready to begin.
Thank you, Chair Holliday, and good morning to the committee. I'm Kate Basil. I'm from the City Manager's Office, and I'm joined today by my colleague, Rupi China, who's the Interim Executive Director of the Customer Experience Division. And we have a presentation today that is going to provide, particularly for the new members of the committee, an overview of the mandate of the Service Excellence Committee. We're also going to talk a little bit about some of the work that the committee has already done and some of the direction that's been provided in the areas of focus of the committee for staff to follow up on. And then thirdly, we'll talk a bit more detail about 311, and that will come into play when we talk about the mandate. It's very specific to the role of 311 in supporting the work of the customer service standards and experience. So Rupi will provide more details on that. So to begin, this slide gives an overview of the mandate for this committee. So through a mayoral decision, this committee was established, and it was established to have a mandate to really focus on how we can leverage 311 data with the intent of improving city services, being more responsive to the needs of Torontonians. In addition to that mandate, the committee, the duties and responsibilities of the committee were also outlined, and that's what's reflected on the right-hand side of this slide around responsibilities. So there were 3 key responsibilities outlined. The first is around leveraging data and systems, not only 311, but looking at where we have other data that can be used to inform our understanding about resident satisfaction of city services, inform priority setting and planning and budgeting processes. Another responsibility that has been outlined is leveraging and identifying opportunities to improve city services and processes. And there were a few areas highlighted in that. So for example, how this committee can help to work towards removing barriers to making service requests, accessing knowledge and self-service, enhancing service request status and queue tracking. We're going to talk a little bit about some of that work as well. The last area of responsibility that was outlined for this committee is largely around building public confidence in the city services. And that's by promoting service excellence and service standards. It's around enhancing accountability. It's around detecting and closing communication gaps through the work that this committee is helping to drive forward. The next piece, I just want to show you a little bit about the work that has been advanced since this committee started coming together. So the committee first met in December 2023, met 5 times last year. And this slide gives you a sense of the kind of work that's been happening. So on the right side of the slide, we've had a series of discussions and presentations from various divisions about the work that they are doing to improve response and alignment with service standards. So we had a series of presentations and discussions in these areas: senior services and long-term care, Toronto Water, urban forestry, solid waste management services, MLS, and transportation. There's also been work, so on the left side, where we reported back as staff on a survey that was conducted called the Listening to Toronto survey. So this was a survey that was issued last year to try to get a sense.
Excuse me, Chair, can I interject for a moment? Can you hear me?
Councillor Crisanti? We can hear you, Councillor Crisanti.
I think I'm having problems here. Okay.
Councillor Crisanti, if you can hear me, I'll ask that the clerk try to connect with you.
Anything.
I can hear you, Vince. Did they start the meeting?
Oh, Paul, yeah, that's precisely why
I'm gonna ask if we just pause the presentation and
I don't hear anyone speaking to it. So I guess they haven't started the meeting.
Mr. Chair, can you hear Councillor Crisanti and I?
No, they can't hear us, Paul. So it's just you and I.
Uh,
Paul, I'll check with the chair. It's Antoinette. I'll check with the clerk.
Oh, great. Thank you.
Hi, good morning, councillors. It's Ashley Curtis from Transportation. I don't know if you can hear, but I'd been liaising with Barbara. The sound tech guys were saying that everything should be working and we should be able to hear, but none of us could hear anything that was going on in the meeting.
That's correct. We can't.
Good morning, everyone. We're just going to call a very quick 5-minute recess just to get the sound fixed. My colleagues on the committee need to be able to hear what's happening, so I trust you understand. So 5-minute recess. Thank you.
there we go, Vince.
Yeah. I figured there's something not working here. So how are you, Paul?
Oh, not too bad. Not bad.
Good.
You?
Yeah, not bad.
Mic check. Hello, this is Nadine, your host. Member Crisanti and Ainsley, can you both hear me now?
Yes, I could.
Paul Ainsley.
Okay, perfect. Okay, perfect. We're just working on the issue. It may be resolved. Just stand by, please.
Good morning, everyone. I don't know if we're at 5 minutes, but that's the end of our recess. Just so everyone knows, we did lose sound connectivity to the members. So just for their courtesy, I'm going to ask those members if there are any declarations of interest, because I don't know if you had the opportunity to do that. And seeing none, we will proceed. We are on agenda item number 3, which is an introduction to the mandate of the Service Excellence Committee. We were a couple of minutes into the presentation, but I'm going to ask the staff that are here delivering just to restart it, just to ensure that the members have the benefit of the full presentation and that there's no question that they've received the materials. So with that, I'll just ask if Councillor Ainsley and Councillor Crisanti can sort of give us a nod or a signal that you've got our sound. I got the thumbs up.
I can hear.
So Ms. Basil, I'm going to invite you to restart item number 3. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Chair Holiday. So good morning. It's Kate Basil from the City Manager's Office, and I'm joined today by Rupi China, who's our Interim Executive Director of the Customer Experience Division. Today, we are providing an overview of the Service Excellence Committee, partly as part of the welcome to the new members to the committee, and also to provide an update of the work that the committee has been doing since we started meeting. So our presentation, I will review the mandate of the Service Excellence Committee. We'll talk a bit about the role that this committee plays and has played in service excellence at the city, and then Rupi will bring us into a discussion specifically about the 311 customer experience approach and system modernization. So this is the slide that really speaks about the mandate of the committee, and this committee was established through mayoral decision. It was the mandate here on the left really outlines that the focus of this committee is looking at how we can better leverage 311 data to better understand where there are opportunities to improve city services and be more responsive to the needs of all Torontonians. So that's the mandate of the committee, and then there are responsibilities that have been outlined for this committee as well, which is on the right side of the slide, these 3 key areas. So the first key area is around the responsibility of the committee to make recommendations on opportunities to leverage the 311 data system, as well as other sources of data as well. And really the intent of that is looking at opportunities for us to measure resident satisfaction, to analyze trends across the city in terms of that satisfaction, identify areas where more focus and work may be needed. It's also to help inform priority setting and planning. The other area of responsibility for the committee is around making recommendations about opportunities to improve city services and processes. So some of the items that have been outlined specific to that are around service requests. So how to remove barriers to making a service request for members of the public, how to enhance service request status and queue tracking right from start to finish and closing the loop as we've been discussing a bit at this committee already. And then the last responsibility for the committee is around building public confidence in city services. And that's by promoting service standards and service excellence. It's also around enhancing accountability, particularly what has been outlined is related to the complaints and compliments mechanisms, as well as identifying where there are communication gaps and implementing ways to close those communication gaps. So the committee first convened December 2023 and met 5 times last year. In that time, this slide highlights kind of the areas of work that the committee has been advancing. So we had a polling that went out to residents of Toronto. That's here, the first one called the Listening to Toronto Survey, which was really aimed to get a perception from residents of their experience, their perception and actual experience in terms of services that they receive by the city. And this was across the whole city, and we reported back to this committee to show the findings of that survey. And the intent is to repeat this survey, to do it a couple of times a year, which will help us in understanding as one data source of many, what the service experience is across the city. There was also work from this committee providing direction to staff on improvements to be made to the city's complaints process. There were requests around advancing work to better report on 311's data, including we've had discussions about how best to share the data in dashboard formats. There was requests and work about expanding the kinds of service requests that residents and businesses can submit directly to 311. Work to refresh the city's service promise and standards, as well as updates on the service standards and responses to service requests from key divisions. Part of what has helped in terms of engaging in some of these discussions is to really focus in on certain areas of the city and certain divisions. And this box here on the right shows where we've had some more focused discussions on service standards and improving responses in the areas. I won't go through each bullet, but they're here. And there were presentations and discussion for each of these service areas and divisions that came to talk to this committee. With that, I'm going to pass over to Rupi to talk a bit more about 311.
Thank you, Kate, and good morning, committee members. So before we talk about data and the importance of data that comes from 311, I wanted to start by providing a little bit more context around 311 and the services that 311 provides, as those services are the foundation of the data that we'll talk about today. 311 provides residents, businesses, and visitors with access to information and service support 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And they are able to reach us through multiple channels, including self-service and phone. And when contacting 311 by phone, services are accessible in over 180 languages and in 130 languages on the web self-service. In addition to providing general inquiry support, 311 also provides intake for approximately 600 services on behalf of our integrated service divisions. As an example, someone can report a pothole by providing the required details, including the option for pictures if done through self-service. And once submitted, they will receive a trackable service request number, the expected time to resolution, and the option for updates if they choose to provide their contact info. In parallel, the details of the service request are seamlessly sent to transportation for actioning. Once actioned, transportation staff are able to trigger the closing of the service request with notes that can also come back to 311 for closing the loop. In the coming slides, I will share how data and feedback associated to these services is used to make ongoing improvements and decisions. 311's journey to modernization began in November of 2021 with the introduction of self-service capabilities. These capabilities include the ability to initiate new service requests, track the status of an existing request, find information through the robust library of articles, or even explore your neighborhood section. And this section allows someone to see what's happening in their neighborhood. So for example, did someone report the same pothole, or did someone report a coyote sighting in the same area? And all of this is also available on the go through mobile. Here is an example of the type of data that 311 compiles and reviews on a regular basis to ensure effectiveness and efficiency in the contact center. In 2024, we had 1.29 million interactions with the public. On the right-hand side of the screen, you'll see that while there was some increase in mobile and web channels, the phone channel remains as the preferred channel of contact for all interactions. In the middle, you'll notice that of the 1.29 million interactions, approximately 60% were general inquiries. General inquiries are generally informational in nature. This could be an example of someone calling 311 looking for directions to a civic center or for opening hours of their local library or skating rinks. And we have roughly another 32% of the interactions that represent service requests. And while individually the data points are telling, when you look at them holistically, they provide even greater insights. Together, they highlight the significant opportunities to increase self-service adoption. A simpler, easier, and faster self-service experience, especially for general inquiries or routine service requests, means that we can optimize and maximize agent availability to support callers with more complex needs. For example, a newcomer whose first language may not be English and needs help navigating their first property tax bill or utility bill, or just simply to handle the higher call volumes after a major weather event. Additionally, we can go even deeper and more detailed around service requests. This data is available to counselors as well as to our integrated service divisions through the Business Intelligence portal. This data can be reviewed in many ways and in combination of parameters. It provides a pulse on hot topics that may be generating public inquiries or requests through 311. It allows us to track those issues and support on needed action plans. As an example, we recently worked with MLS to provide data support on the coyote issue. In the coming months, we will be working with our technology colleagues to make this information publicly available in a more visual format, including performance against service standards, and this will supplement what is already available through open data. And finally, this is a snapshot of the top 10 service requests reported in 2024 across our integrated service divisions, which again can be used to indicate trends or areas that require specific attention by the division. We continue to leverage these insights so that we are focused on delivering outcomes that are important to the public and also support our ability to meet their ongoing needs. If we consider our 2025 objectives and how they relate to the information shared today, Take, for example, digital channel improvements. We will deliver incremental enhancements to ensure that we support self-service adoption and that the public has a simple and easy experience, whether they're looking for information or opening up a service request. Closing the loop is about improving communications with customers on the progress of their service requests. We are working with our integrated divisional partners to standardize information needed to provide customers with timely and relevant notes on the actions taken that have been to resolve their service requests. The parks integration, which is coming also in 2025, will allow the public to easily open up service requests through a centralized 311 intake experience that is consistent with other integrated divisional service requests, while also meeting the Auditor General's recommendations on tracking and reporting. And finally, public reporting on our performance relative to service standards provides transparency for the public on how we are doing based on their reported requests. To conclude, 311 provides important data from which valuable information and insights can be developed to support key decisions and continuous improvements to service delivery, starting from the initial intake through 311, the divisional action, the communications that come back to the customers, and then final closure of the service request.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I will ask the committee members if there are any questions of staff. Councillor Fletcher?
I'm hoping we're able to not just stick to 5 minutes here, because when we're trying to get information on this committee.
I will keep an eye on our colleagues online, but you have my full
Thank you.
support.
I'm just going to page 9, so which are all of the different requests, or the hit parade here, top 10. Then how and who determines that all 22,000 calls or messages to 311, what the outcome of that was, and how is that reported out in any way, shape, or form? The same with injured wildlife, pick up dead wildlife. That's a lot of calls. So how does the loop get closed on that? Not just, first of all, for the caller, second for the division, and third for, these are the top ones, because there's only 5 areas that are on 311. How do those standing committees, or how does council get advised of the efficiencies of closing these cases, if they're closed or not? It might clear. I know I'm very tired today, so I might not be.
I think so. So the chair, we do provide monthly reports to the councillor offices that highlight some of this information. From a 311 perspective, the intake, once the intake is completed, the request is sent to the responsible division. So in the case of bin lid damaged, that would go to solid waste.
Okay.
They will get notification, and then they will work on that request, and then provide feedback to 311 to close the service request.
So if we were to say, bring us, first of all, when you say completed, that means for you, but completed when it's for me means that the request has actually been fulfilled.
Correct.
So I think some of the language that we use here is confusing, because it's the only thing that was completed is that it was turned in.
So completed, even from a 311 perspective, actually means it was sent to the division,
Right.
and actioned by the division. And once fulfilled by the division, they would, generally speaking, they would close the service request.
Sent to the division, actioned by the division,
Correct.
but you don't know if the action resulted in completion or not.
No, when they action and they close the service request, we are assuming that they have
Yeah,
action.
assuming. Okay, so I think that's my issue here, is that get it, send it. How do you know they've actioned it?
We rely on them to action it when they close the service request, and it comes back to us in a closed status.
It comes back to you as closed.
Correct.
So how many of the residential bin lid damaged calls came back as closed in 2024?
Offhand, I don't have that information. We'd have to pull it and get back to you.
And that would come from the division.
Correct.
So I think, Mr. Chair, I think that's one of those things. Are there any divisions that are receiving requests, actioning them, but they're not closed at this point? A lot of people call me and say, I've called 311 4 times and it still hasn't been resolved. So there are simple ones and there are difficult ones, but that's a different matter. I think that's just my first pass at those, because I'm interested in how you intake, but from my standpoint, I'm most interested in how they're actually handled, which isn't the mandate of this committee, or is it?
I think we've talked about how 311 bridges the activities over to the divisions and the work order system, and there may be an opportunity to dig into that, Councillor, for sure, through a motion or a letter to the committee. We can definitely come back and do more work on that. But I think that in itself is quite a bit of work.
Well, if we just chose one division, because intake is different, and then tracking, we're not tracking the completion rates holistically. Would you agree with that? From a council perspective. From a division perspective, you're hearing. But if you've sent 22,000 complaints in and there's only been 10,000, then that's of concern. You've done your job. You've sent it in. But I think we have a different job in overseeing divisions and making sure that fulfilling the requests is done timely and that it's done.
And Chair, so we can provide reports. So of the 22,000, as an example, if needed, we can provide of those how many are open, how many are closed. Through the BI, we also track performance against the service standard. So that is available in the current BI tool that we have.
Understand, but I guess, Mr. Chair, okay, a second, I'm not going to go into an EI tool. I want to see performance standards from a divisional standpoint for all of those that we have set up 311 for the public, and we know that there's a good triage. Is it happening? That's
agreed.
Mr.
I
Chair?
guess that's the city manager that has to answer.
Sorry, I just want to check, sorry, is somebody wanting to answer?
That one.
Yeah. Mr. Chair, I was just going to offer that because we actually, hi there, for our 2022 storm, the point that you brought up around the closing of the service requests when they come to the staff and how they get actioned, we've made a significant change to your point about closing them out and actually having it result on an action on the ground for the customer. And so we've been working very closely with 311 on that through our closing the loop process, and we'd be happy to come back and talk about what we've learned through that process and where we still have improvements to make. So we can offer ourselves up as a guinea pig on that one.
I don't even see you on the top 10.
Well, I know, but I feel like, I don't
understand that.
But I think for our,
We might be there.
we're happy to do it though, especially for these two storms. We have a good comparison. So, yeah.
So,
Yes, that's okay.
So
I'd
let
like
me-
to see that. Sorry, go ahead.
It's okay, Councillor. What I wanted to do was offer up our colleagues to ask some questions. I got a couple that might help on this, and then we can certainly come back to
Yeah.
another round of questions. So I'll check with my colleagues online. Are there further questions on the presentation?
Yes,
I'm good.
I have
Councillor Ainsley.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'll go ahead and I'll ask one because I wanted to get to this point because Councillor Fletcher's raised a good one. I'll start my clock.
Mr. Chair, I just want to know if you can hear me.
I can very well, Councillor Cassandra.
Okay, good. Thank you.
It's an easy question.
Calling, and then first, and then I'm next. I just want to know where I am in line.
I'd
Okay.
just like you to ask
So-
a question now.
So my question was just around snowplow damage, for example, is a 311 request. And I know when we last explored it, and it may have changed, somebody would call into 311 and say, hey, the plow, it ripped up the grass on the edge of my lawn. And the call taker would say, well, thanks for letting us know. The response time is a long time on this because it's middle of winter and they have to plant new sod, so it could be a few months. And the old system, at least, 311 would bridge over the issue to transportation services and then mark that as closed because, they sent the request over. And transportation services has said, we got it. And we sent somebody out and we looked. And yes, the plow ripped up the lawn and they marked it closed. And the citizen says, well, there's still a hole in the lawn. But what transportation services did is they bridged the issue over to the contractor that's responsible for it and said, fix it, put it on your list. And the contractor says, okay, it's on the list. And that was the gap, was that the real action wasn't resolved, but the process had shown that it was, and so there was a breakdown. So, Ms. Gray, just to round out the question, do I understand that those gaps, at least from a transportation's perspective, are becoming more recognized, and that you've got a process and a work order system that is set to resolve that, so that when you actually look up the 311 status, it shows it in real life, not in terms of bridging stuff over?
Yes, Mr. Chair. So we are fortunate to be on Maximo for our winter service requests, and so we are able to create sort of parent and child tickets so that we can actually close something in one area and then create a new service request, but keep that thread so that we can keep in contact with the person who made that request. And also, that's a great example on the sod damage because you wouldn't actually repair it for a number of months, but that person wants to know that it hasn't been forgotten. So that's what, we would be prepared to come back and fully describe that with a more fulsome briefing.
So if the committee, maybe over to Ms. Basil or Ms. China, if the committee wanted to dig into where those gaps are and why they are, and what council can do to support to close those gaps, because we just want citizens to have accurate information so they feel like their request has been heard and that at least it's on a list. We can talk about how long it takes, but at least it's on a list. Could the committee ask you to do that and come back with more detail? And we're probably going to spend some time. Is that doable for us? And we'll find a way to get that direction to you.
Chair, yes, that's absolutely doable. And so some of the work has begun through the Closing the Loop initiative.
Right.
But we're certainly happy to work with the committee to understand what more we can do.
So the other thing I wanted to check about was the top 10 service requests are only those divisions that use 311.
Yes.
So I don't see any parks on here.
Right.
So what does that mean? What should the committee know about that, and what's the future?
Chair, so parks integration with 311 is planned for Q3, Q4 of this year. Once the parks operation service requests are integrated, they will benefit from all of the same features and data collection that we currently have for the other ISDs, for the other integrated service divisions. So that is happening, that is targeted for prior to the end of the year.
So 1.29 million calls is a staggering number of calls, right? That's enormous information about the pulse of the city. Within those, do I understand the current practice is if somebody calls and says, I have a parks issue, something's broken in the park, 311 doesn't make it a service request in that. It's a bridge over to the Parks Department who then manage it on their own. And that's different, right? So that 60% that is sort of information calls, those numbers could change. The 1.2 million could go up because 311 will now be writing service requests in an entirely different tracking mechanism. Is that my understanding? And so the committee should expect that, right, to get more information now?
Correct.
Is that part of 1.29, the parks calls?
So, thank you. I'll ask you for Councillor Fletcher. Out of the 1.29 million, you don't have to give me the number, but what do I understand that tells me about people's interactions with parks? How does it fit into that number?
So the 60% that are general inquiries, some of those are for parks, as an example today. So somebody calling for directions to High Park, as an example, is captured in the 60% of those 1.29 million interactions. As you've said, Chair, what's not captured is the service request, because that functionality is not yet there, and that is what's coming later this year.
Thank you. Councillor Crisanti, did you have questions?
Can you hear me?
Yes, sorry, I was trying to unmute myself. I did. I thought that Councillor Ainsley was going to go before me. Thank you, Chair. I do have a couple of questions. Just to go back to beginning of the presentation when you spoke to better leveraging the 311 data. What are we currently doing to leverage it? What's the plan, the current plan of leveraging data? And what are the suggestions in terms of better leveraging? I want to understand the term better. What are we currently doing now?
So, Chair, as an example, the way we can use some of that data, again, for example, we support some of the other divisions in the data collection. Again, we worked with MLS as an example to understand what the data was around the coyote, so that they could help, so that we could assist in the development of their action plans or support in the development of their action plans. Data around the channels that people are using to contact us. Again, phone is a very popular channel, and it highlights an opportunity for us to actually drive self-service. So those are some of the ways that we're looking at the data. By looking at what's closed, what's not closed, looking at what are people complaining about, those actually help us drive some of the initiatives. So for example, closing the loop, understanding that when somebody requests a service request, but it might get closed and they're not satisfied with that, then it helps us, it guides us into directions to understanding where those gaps might be. So those are some of the ways that we are using the data.
Okay, thank you. So what about the actual service provided by 311? So a couple of things and problems I've heard a number of times over the past number of months is that many times the people end up escalating the call to our office because they're calling 311 and they're frustrated. After 2-3 times, they get transferred. Nobody at the other end, then they have to start from scratch again. So seems to be a glitch in the system from that perspective, and or the issue is not resolved in a time sensitive time frame. It just takes too long, or it's just not getting done. How will we be looking at that to resolve some of these issues? Have you also heard about what I've just mentioned at your end, and do you know that this exists?
Chair, so we do intake for the existing integrated service divisions. On occasion, we will get calls for services that we are not integrated with, and we do our best to transfer the call to a live body. So if there is a division, after hours call, for example, to Toronto Public Health, or even during the day, we're not integrated with Toronto Public Health as an example, but we will do our best again to transfer the call to a live body on the other side. Unfortunately, if there's no one there to pick up the call, then we do direct the caller to call back. Because there's no way for us to take the call itself.
So isn't it possible that, okay, I'm a 311 operator, you call me, you have an issue, and I'm going to transfer you to the correct department. So I say to you, I'm going to stay on the line with you until somebody answers. Can you not do that to make sure that that customer is actually connected with someone before I connect and before I give them instructions about, look, just call me back? Mm-hmm. That's not the best way to service a particular constituent, when they're concerned, or it could be something serious. Could we not change our policy where we stay on the line to ensure that we get connected?
So, Chair, we can certainly take that back. We do have service levels that we are mandated to hit. So when calls start to take longer, it actually means that we potentially don't hit our service levels. So that's not to say that we cannot change the policy, but those are some of the things that we would consider if we wanted to do that.
The other side of service levels also is customer satisfaction. So Agreed. If we do that, I think that'll go up a notch, because I'm getting, and I don't, other my colleagues could speak for themselves on their experiences, but that has been my experience, and unresolved files as well, which I believe Councillor mentioned herself. The files, how do we know they're actually resolved? And we've gotten calls here where they're not resolved, so then we have to pick it up at our end, and we very quickly get them resolved. So I think that's a consideration. I don't know if you need a motion to that. I am happy to undertake to look at that and let us know and let the committee know if the viability of that, and to ensure that people get connected, their problems are looked after. Move on to the next call, and you've done your best on the last one. The next question, if I may, do I have time?
I just want to do a time check. I'm going to suggest we'll go to a second round, Councillor Crisanti. Sure. Councillor Ainsley, did you have questions on this item? And okay, I'm sorry, because of the screen layout, it's really hard to see if you raise your hand, but it's better now. So, Councillor Crisanti, if you've got questions, how about we allow Councillor Fletcher a second round, and then we'll come back for sure, and we'll continue on. So, Councillor Fletcher, did you want a second round? Did you have further?
Yeah, I'm still
Go right ahead.
Trying to, and 311 was here when it got set up, so that was set up for residents in order to interface and be able to have their issues dealt with. And of the 1.29 million calls, you're saying that 60% of those are informational calls. So that's what, about over 600,000 of those, maybe 700,000. You're giving information out that people can get readily. And then the rest of those, 500 or so, those are actions for city divisions. So my real interest is kind of an overarching one, and I think it's more for the Mr. Jollymore or the city manager's office. Just with this committee, we're kind of rethinking 311.20. So it's one thing to be giving information, and that's great. The other one is the service requests that are set up for residents to have their issues resolved. And it's unclear exactly what happens and how the divisions are responsible for closing them and advising of their closing, and who watches over that. I don't think that's a 311 responsibility to say, oh, well, solid waste, we sent you 22,000 and you've actioned, I don't know, 18. What happened to the other 4,000? I don't believe that's a 311 responsibility. I just want to be clear before you answer that the 22,000 does not include any information requests, like where do I get a new green bin, where do I get a new X bin? Those are all my bins damaged, correct?
Service request.
So how does that, you're taking that, your intake, that's great, but having 22,000 the top calls are for bins being damaged during pickup. That's also another issue. That is information for city staff, not for residents as well. So that's the part I'm really interested in. I'll call it the back end. So who would like to answer how you use that information to make sure that divisions are meeting realistic and easy requests? And if they're not easy, how do they get escalated? And who watches for patterns? Who watches for patterns that in my ward, the bins are always broken? I don't know. That's how the information is used a little differently. That's my first question. My second is about the survey. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, maybe I can provide some comments based on your question, Councillor Fletcher. So I think there's a couple of things. I think 311 and the Customer Experience Division can provide data to the operating divisions related to the number of service requests, and we can certainly also assist with open work orders, although I would expect that operational leaders are monitoring and managing the work orders on an ongoing basis. I think that's number one. I think number two is that, and this has come up a couple of times today, I think one of the actions that we can also take is to establish business rules around work order management across the different operating divisions. For example, a requirement to update the notes with sufficient detail to provide the public with a status or other information related to their request. So I think we have the data. The data isn't the issue. I think there's additional pieces of data perhaps we can provide, including work orders open and aged, and other information which may assist the operating divisions.
And just the oversight, the completion oversight is sitting where? City manager?
So certainly we can look at it holistically. The city manager's office or the DCMs can look at it holistically in terms of how we're performing relative to the work order management piece, which has a direct impact on customer experience. But the divisions themselves are accountable to manage their work orders and their operations and the performance of those.
Oh, I totally understand that, but then there's an oversight that's actually working as planned. And are there patterns there that somebody's looking for in any of these divisions? That's a lot of wildlife pickup. Is there anything else going on out there? There's so much data that it's used in a very narrow fashion.
Yes. So, Mr. Chair and Councillor Fletcher, yes, I think it's relatively straightforward for us to enhance our oversight overall of the service requests that are being issued by 311.
And then I just have a question on the survey, because it does appear to be a general survey. With operations of this kind, I would think one might go back to the users or the people that have called, not a city survey. You might not use 311. So how do you go back to those people that have accessed 311 to find out, did it satisfy you? Did your complaint get sorted out? How many times did you have to call? And where's that data for us here?
So, Chair, we do have surveys. One survey goes out after the call or interaction with 311 is completed, and a second survey is done after the service request itself is completed. So we have two opportunities there to gather feedback in terms of the interactions with the city. So we have that data in 311, and we're certainly happy to share that.
Maybe we should have that here. Can I just ask that we rethink that word completed? Because people, when completed, that means for most people, that has been done. Whatever they called about has been done. But there's two sets of completion, and it's confusing. Right? It's a little confusing. So maybe just the language, I know it's hard because that's what you're using.
The Chair, so we can work
transferred
on that.
Or what in process. I don't know what the word is, but we've heard completed, and I know with my staff we get the completed, but they're not completed. Let's just say with vacant home tax, it looked like they were completed, but they weren't completed. They were in process of being completed, which is
Chair. We can work with the integrated service divisions as well to come up with some nomenclature that actually makes sense from a public perspective in terms of
that would be helpful. Thank you.
Defining what we mean by done or completed.
I think the next question.
Just the word that. We'll go in the thesaurus and look up one that is close.
Okay, I have a couple of quick questions, and then we'll go to Councillor Crisanti for the completion of the second round. So my first question, and it was inspired by Councillor Fletcher. So we have in one of the other items, and what gets sent out to councillors is a dashboard about all the top service requests and by region, and you can look at it by time of the year and so on. But there's the service requests, and then you can get more information about how long it took, but then there's targets I'll just use the word target for now. We can call it a service level, service standard, so on. What's the future view about looking at basically how are we doing in terms of what happened and what the target was to happen? And where's that headed? And I would say there's clearly an agenda item here today to talk about that, but could you make a comment about where that's headed and what and how this committee would be involved? Because I think it's a really important question.
So through the BI, you're right, we collect information about the top 10 service requests as an example, but we also collect performance against those service targets. So for example, if picking up a dead cadaver takes X number of days, we also do measure how often we've hit that target. That is currently available in the BI. It does still require some work, Chair, but as part of the one of the other items on the agenda today, which is to publish data publicly, that includes our performance against those service standards. So that's also something we are looking at for later this year.
So good or bad, that data will go out eventually, and by its very nature of being in the public, then instigates a process between council and the public service to take a closer look. Do I understand the theory right? And we'll see how the practice goes.
I believe you're right, yes.
Okay. My second question is a little bit technical to the clerk, actually. For the benefit of my colleagues, this committee exists and we have a special relationship with the executive committee. And I wondered if the clerk could help myself and the members understand, if we make motions, the committee has certain authorities, the executive committee certainly has a lot more, and of course council, but how do we position ourselves in the continuum of governance that may be a little different than a typical standing committee? And for the members of public listening, understanding our relationship and our authorities here, because I know we get into lots of really great questions, but what are the things we can do? And what are the things that we should recommend that the executive committee do?
Okay, Chair. So the committee was established as a special committee that reports to the executive committee. So it has an advisory function. Its authority to direct staff and resources is limited. Therefore, recommendations would flow up to the executive committee for executive committee to direct resources and staff, such as in the case of staff reports, or to further transmit the item to City Council for a final decision.
And so we receive reports. Sometimes or often they get forwarded to either the executive committee or council. We take deputations. We write motions here. But I guess the main takeaway is that the members have to remember that the recommendations we give are ultimately the decision of the executive committee or council, depending on what the ask is.
That's correct.
Thank you very much. That's the end of my questions. Councillor Crisanti, you had some additional as the third of the second round.
Yes, Chair. Thank you once again. So I just want to go back to the survey, if I could, for a moment. I believe you indicated that you did a survey last year and you're planning to do another one this year. What format will this survey take?
To the chair, so the survey that we took, it was a polling survey, so Ipsos Reid assisted the city doing this. I should say that the intent of this survey was to complement data that we have, say, through 311. So we recognize 311 has service request data as a source. The intent of this was to have a representative sample of Toronto residents. So we sampled, there were about 1,000 participants. It was offered in multiple languages. We had it out between August and September of last year. So the intent would be, it was sort of a pulse check, a moment in time of getting feedback from residents on services across the city. So the idea would be that we would repeat that polling, again, as a way to complement other data sources. We don't want it to duplicate, but to give a picture that's likely capturing probably many residents who call 311, but it may also be including residents who don't call 311 around their experience with services at the city.
Okay, thank you. And you plan to do another one this year?
Yes, that's correct.
Any consideration given? How about this as an option? And we've all experienced it in other areas in our lives when we're calling, Rogers or Bell or other people. And how about a survey that's done in real time to get a pulse check right at that moment? So I'm calling 311. You answer the phone. You stay with me on the line. You're giving me great service. You make sure I get connected to someone. And then, but prior to that, in your recording or somewhere along the line, I have an option to hit 2 or hit 3 if I wish to provide my my comments, about the call, and do a real-time survey right at that moment. So while things are fresh in everybody's mind, and that data is collected through that particular survey method. Have anyone considered doing that? And is that viable? Can we consider maybe potentially looking at a possibility of doing something like that?
So, Chair, we don't do a live survey on the line itself, but after an interaction with a customer, we do offer them to send an email survey. And they have the opportunity to fill out feedback and comments with the survey after the interaction.
So that's offered at the interaction stage prior to the call concluding?
At the completion of the call, they will be sent a link to a survey. But we do ask for their permission to send that survey. So they are requested if they would like to participate. If they answer yes, then we will send them a survey link. And that's immediately after the interaction. We can certainly consider whether we're able to provide a live survey at the end of the call.
Okay. That'd be another option. And I think we probably will get a lot of good real-time results right at that moment in time. One other question, if I may. So last year, this is a new committee, we met 5 times. And I'm sorry, maybe I missed it, but what were, if any, recommendations that came out of the first set of meetings that we had last year? And where are we with these recommendations currently, if there are any?
To the chair, so that's correct. So there were 5 meetings. The key areas where there were recommendations in were related to the complaints and compliments process enhancements, reporting through 311 on dashboards, looking at the citywide service promise refresh, and each of those has recommendations and work in progress. We could come back sort of with a status, if that would be helpful in terms of the next meeting, on a status of where we were at with all of those requests. There are several, I would say, that are in play and being worked on at the moment.
Yes, so that would be my additional request. If you could please come back with the status of that. I think it's good to know how progressing with the recommendation to make sure that we're moving forward and we're being productive during the course of meetings. Yes. All right, thanks so much, Chair. I'm good with that.
Okay, I'll just check. Are there any additional questions?
Yes.
Councillor Fletcher.
Your survey is about how the intake went, correct?
That's correct.
So I think in setting up the Service Excellence Committee, it's not just about, and I'll ask whoever set it up, city manager, it's not just about how the intake went. It's about, did that request get fulfilled in a timely manner by the division? And that is, I still can't understand how we know that, who's monitoring that, because it's not 311's job, in my opinion, and how we're surveying those people, not about their intake, but about the end result, and not surveying the general public, surveying them. So is that a package that we currently have, or is that a package that we need to be, that we could potentially be working towards?
So, Chair, after fulfillment of the service request, there is another opportunity for the person that submitted the service request to provide us with feedback and comments through a survey link. Additionally, we can, again, work with the integrated service divisions. We can certainly add more information to the monthly reports that we generate and share with the councillor offices in regards to things like completion rates.
It's not about the councillor offices. It's about, this is what's the budget for 311? It's fairly significant, I think.
Roughly 25 million.
25 million. So we're investing in an operation for residents to have their service requests met. And the process is they have a chance to call in, email in, mostly call in, and then you're measuring their satisfaction with the intake. I think that's for 311. It's not, in my contention, and I'm looking at you, from City Manager's office, it's not 311's job to measure if their service requests were completed properly or timely. They may have the infrastructure to give you that information, but that's not their responsibility. I'm not sure, that's my opinion. I'd like to hear that overarching approach.
Yes.
Is it their job?
So to the chair, it's broader than 311. So in terms of, I think, what you're asking about in terms of looking overall, looking how that links to service in the divisions, it goes back to a bit around the work between, I think, the city manager's office and the deputy city manager's office. And to your question of, is that still work to be done and that could be done? I think the answer is yes, and that we should come back and look at how we look at that overall. It is, to your question, it is beyond 311.
Yes, the 500, let's be really clear. 311, and correct me if I'm wrong, the 700 information requests, that's entirely within 311's jurisdiction. They are just giving out information. Once somebody is asked to have something fixed on their sidewalk, 311 is the intake. You're tracking how well that worked. But then at that point, once it's turned over, somebody else has to make sure that that division is living up to all the service requests. And would you agree that is not the 311 role? They are there to get it, the information, but it's not their role.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's broader than 311. It's across the divisions.
And then I heard Ms. Gray say that they've established something that goes further, and maybe that's worth hearing about how that happens, because it may be a template or an initial template for all divisions, but as well, and it's also at budget time, at every time, if you're only getting a 20% completion, let's say on tree pruning, then somebody in management higher up has to know that what's the issue around tree pruning? No money, no this, no that. So it's just, perhaps we're not making the full use of our data yet.
To the chair, I agree. I think that there's opportunity to use it more, and that is part of the intent, I think, of this committee working with staff to look at how can we use it more to ultimately improve our services. So we collect all of this data, but it has to be used in terms of making, continuous improvement. So I agree.
And when 311 was set up, it was just set up with these 5 divisions? And is this the first review of the number of divisions that would be under 311? Or I'm sure that this started with the parks, started in this committee. Kind of, yes, no? No, here they are. That was set up in that way. That was the foundational pieces.
Can someone answer the question about the story of the different divisions and how they've come on board?
Transpo, water, MLS, urban forestry.
Being set up through 311?
That was the initial framework for 311 when it was set up in 2000, I don't know, 8 or 9.
Correct. Those were the original divisions that were part of the integration plans when 311
And then at what point was that reviewed? Because now it's 2025, and now we're only now talking about putting parks operations on here?
Chair, so I don't have any information of what the review was in between, but definitely, yes, parks is part of the process, or will be.
I understand. I think we've been here 15 years, and how it renews. Anyway, I think you know what I'm asking. I don't know if it came from conversations here at your Service Excellence Chair, that was really a vacuum that needed to be filled.
So, Mr. Chair, maybe I can provide a couple of comments. So, the ability to integrate 311 with the operating divisions depends on technology enablement, right? So, I think the original decision was on the basis of work order management systems within those divisions, and the ability to actually integrate. I think, you know, we've advanced the technology in the form of a couple of different tools, Salesforce in terms of customer relationship management, and a new work order management system which has been underway, the deployment of which has been underway for the last several years, right? I think with respect to parks, certainly it was always, we always anticipated that parks operations and recreation would be added and integrated with 311. That depends on the technology enablement pieces that I just mentioned. And as Rupi has mentioned, that's coming later this year.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Seeing none, are there members wishing to speak to this item?
Yeah, sure, I will.
Is that Councillor Crisanti? Did I?
Yes, Chair. Well, whenever maybe someone else will.
Yeah, so Councillor Crisanti, just so you know, there's a motion ready for you at your suggestion about asking staff to come back and report on the status. Is that something you'd like to move?
Yes, I do. Can I have a look at the motion quickly, please?
So I'll tell you what, I'll speak for a moment. We'll get you a copy of that, and if you want to move it, that'd be great. So I just want to thank everyone for the presentation and for the depth of comments today and questions. Because it's about the mandate of the committee, I guess the questions can go anywhere and everywhere. But I know that we will be back to talk about a number of the elements. And I welcome the new members to the committee. And I think the members have very quickly caught on to the essence of what we've been talking about, including, you know, prior motions and excitement about bringing other divisions within the city into the integrated divisions at 311, taking a closer look at what our service standards are and how we're doing against them, but by using public reporting and open data and data to councillors and to council and to the management team to look at all of that information to put it together. I do note that the information needs to be read in conjunction with things like budget information, where we make choices about service levels and set them. And that's complicated, but it's important. And it's, I think, what any business would do when they look at the offerings that they provide to customers or citizens in our case, and how well they track that and fund that over time. So I think the work of this committee is exciting. I'm really glad everyone is here, and for the contributions of my colleagues. I look forward to continued work and getting into many of the areas of details that were brought up today and in the past meetings of this committee. And frankly, things that come up in places like the Audit Committee, like the Government Management Committee, like the Executive Committee, and other committees in this city, you know, they seem to cross over with the work here. And I think that's important, because that shows how critical this work is to so many parts of the city. So with that, I'll pause and I'll say, Councillor Crisanti, I'll offer you.
Sorry, Mr. Chair?
Yep.
Sorry, it's Councillor Ainsley.
Yes.
Can I just speak quickly? I
Absolutely.
don't have a motion.
I
just wanted to thank our colleagues, Councillor Crisanti and Councillor Fletcher, for joining what I see as a very important committee. I want to thank you for your support in putting this item on the agenda. I think it's important that our colleagues joining this committee, and maybe a reminder to staff, understand the important and tremendous work that this committee does. I was very happy to join this committee when asked, or when Mayor Chow created this committee. Our residents expect value for their tax dollars. They want to understand the services that they're getting for those tax dollars. All of us as residents of Toronto pay as well, being elected officials, the same tax dollars as our residents do. And I think it's important to understand the intricacies of how government works and in the delivery of those services, because they might be small on one scale, but understanding stone removal, how potholes are filled, your garbage is picked up and dealt with, even, turning on your taps. It's very easy when you turn on your taps in the morning and the water comes through, but it's a very complicated process to get that tap water to your residents. So I just want to thank everybody for being here this morning. It was great to hear all of the questions from our new colleagues as we're moving forward, and I'm looking forward to working with everybody. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Councillor Ainsley. Councillor Crisanti, I think you have a motion.
I do, and I had some questions about my motion. I didn't think it was exactly to be. I did respond via email to Gary Clark. So I don't know if he's had a chance to review that yet. In the meantime, speak to it, or maybe someone else wants to, and then I'll hold it down for a moment.
Stephen, can you put that motion up on the wall?
June 2023. Yeah, can we just put the motion up on the screen? Admittedly, I asked the clerks to try to put it together inspired by your suggestion when you were asking your questions, so I thought I'd offer it to you to move, but if you're satisfied with that, it's to come back to the next meeting, essentially, on the an update on the recommendations that we've asked the staff to deliver on, knowing that they're in progress. There's a number of things being worked on.
Yes, that's fine. That's precisely what I'm trying to get in all the recommendations.
Right. Councillor Crisanti, I'm sorry about the audio connection. Was that the end of your remarks?
Yes, I was going to add a couple of more remarks.
By all means.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So yes, Chair. So that's the intent of the motion, to you get an update on any recommendations, and I think this is a great opportunity to continue to take our level of service to a whole new level, if I can say it that way, Chair. When I heard that the total budget for 311 is $25 million, I thought it was a little less than that. However, that's a significant investment in providing customer service to our constituents. And it's a good investment if we're in fact improving the services as a result of analyzing the data that we're obtaining and reviewing through this particular service. For example, if I may, if when it comes to general pruning, if we have 20,000 requests for general pruning, and that's a consistent number year after year after year, then this is something we could use. This information, critical information, we could use when it comes in our next budget process. Maybe we need to look at how we're delivering the pruning services for trees. It's a critical service. It's a safety issue in many situations. And we have a problem up here when it comes to these requests, because it takes anywhere from 18 to 24 months to get some trees pruned after the service request is made. So it's a very slow area in our city. It's a core service, and it's something that I think we need to look at much closer in terms of improving that particular service. So we have a great opportunity through this analysis of data to ensure that we use this data through our budgeting process to make sure that we're funding the different areas in the best way we can fund it, given our restraints, to deliver the best possible service we can that our taxpayers are asking for. The other comment I made is in terms of ensuring that we deliver the best service when people call in. And the example I gave, if I've had a number of calls when people call us and saying, look, I've given up with 311. I've called once, twice, 3 times. They send me to nowhere. Nobody's on the other end of the line, or they send me to the wrong place. Very fast, so they come to the counselor's office to look after them. If we have an opportunity to, and staff did indicate they're willing to undertake that recommendation, if they're willing to look at staying on the line with the caller to ensure that they are connected to where they need to be connected to look after their issue. And maybe, end the call always, is you satisfied with this call? Anything else we could do for you? That'll go a long way in ensuring that people get a higher level of service. So Chair, it's a great first meeting. I've enjoyed it thoroughly, and I hope that we can continue through these meetings, find improvements and increasing our level of service to our constituents and taxpayers.
Thank you, Councillor Crisanti. Councillor Fletcher.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, on a point of order.
Point of order?
I don't know how to ask this, whether it's a point of order or a point of privilege. I understand the intent of Councillor Crisanti's motion, that it's a progress report on items that this committee has passed. I'm just trying to understand, maybe the clerk can answer this. So if we have an item before us and a list of people come in and make a deputation on it, and we ask staff to go back to do work on it, and a progress report comes back listing all of the motions that we passed, does that enable that same list of people to come back and make a presentation again on that item within the progress report?
Hello, Councillor, that is correct.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Fletcher?
Thanks for that, Councillor Crisanti. I'm not going to elaborate on your motion directly, but I am going to just speak a little bit about what my expectation would be about in progress from today's meeting, since we have a new committee. And in progress, and perhaps I needed to make this motion, but I do need to, from a council point of view, understand intake was great, everything was sent. What was the outcome for those requests across these divisions? So when I'm looking here on the top 10 service requests, bin, garbage, there are way more than 22,000 calls to solid waste. So what happens? It's a big area for calls. Is everything working well for our residents in solid waste? Is everything working well when the residents call in? That to me seems to be one of the advantages of this Service Excellence Committee. Is this year over year? If we were to pull up, maybe you had this last year, Councillor, it was set up in December 2023, so we don't have that. But quite frankly, we could have service requests for the last number of years, and we could look at trends. Pardon? So I'm all about data, I'm all about trends, I'm all about patterns, and I'm all about making sure that management has enough information to know what may or may not have to be recalculated or recalibrated to ensure service excellence. We're not here about service, we're here about service excellence. So if there's something missing in the excellence, once this is all initiated, I think that management needs to know and council needs to know, because our expectation, I believe, is for service excellence. So, Chair, I wouldn't mind seeing if that's what happens out there all the time, that the bins are damaged. That's a lot of bins. Or is that a lot of bins? I don't know. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's a tiny percentage. Also, on this list, the difference between having a bin damaged and a sewer line blocked, I think Mr. DiGeronimo would agree. One is an emergency, and the other is we need to get a new bin somehow. And so the ones that are emergencies, how are they handled? And are they handled well? Is it service excellence for emergencies in the City of Toronto? There's these categories that I'm flagging that I think it will be very helpful to view this data, which is great data, and our staff have put together a great presentation, but to just view that from that point of view. And then I think it'd be great to have that transportation, what Ms. Gray's put together in her division around the how all those things are done, and then see how they're reported back to let the person know that's been closed. I really do want to speak about the survey. We do ask people that called in, was your interaction good? You know, you get that. I always get that when I call OMERS. They say, or Green Shield. They say, how was it? Did you like that? And I can say yes, no, it was great, whatever. I think that's a good thing, and I don't know where that's tracked and what you know about it at 311. But then there's the real request. Did something happen because I called? And that's a user survey too. It's not a general survey of the public on how they like 311. And dividing those calls for information, I think that's important to understand that 60% people just want to know something. And I don't know if you have a triage system. Well, I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fletcher. We have exhausted the speakers list, so we will vote on Councillor Crisanti's motion, which changed the recommendation from receiving the report to having a report back. All those in favor?
I just asked the undertaking and some of those things that I've raised.
All those in favor? Any opposed? That item carries. Okay, we'll go back up to the top of the list, which is item SE 7.1, Customer Experience Division Annual Report 2024. We have a registered speaker. Our speaker is Miguel Avila Velarde. I see Miguel here. Welcome to the Service Excellence Committee, Miguel. You have 5 minutes to speak. Please begin as soon as you're ready. Go ahead. Can we just bend his microphone over? Yeah. Thanks.
Good morning, everybody. I hope everybody have a good night's sleep after the provincial elections last night. I am not. So I'm here to speak on the report, the 2024, and I'm here because of my friend Derek Moran advised me, go and come to speak at this committee because they're going to be talking about 311 service and the report of noises, et cetera, et cetera. So thank you for the presentation. It was a quite interesting report. So I'm here to speak about, as a tenant from Toronto Community Housing that is experiencing residential noises on a regular basis since the year 2024. I have approached the 311 service in the month of November, and the month of November I was able to find out that the MLSEs are not able to cover the hours of 2 a.m. to 7 a.m. And at the last budget consultations, I spoke about increasing the number of officers to close the gap. I am the 9% of residents who complained the 311 service between the hours 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. I spoke first at the TCSC board introducing this machine that a friend of mine got it from a from a condo. As you know, they had the Condo Act, and they don't mess around with noises. They're quick to implement investigation procedures to deal with investigations of noises at nighttime. So the 311 service, the MLSC, are aware that I have, by the way, I had 2 active complaints with the 311 service, active, meaning that at the current time, new technologies are not enabled due to legalistic concerns raised by some members of the council. I presented my deputation at the Toronto Police Services Board because they were dealing with the Community Safety Unit of the Toronto Community Housing. So, as a resident of TCSC, I had to call all the time the Community Safety Unit to investigate the noise complaints I am experiencing. They will never encourage me to call 311. They said, it's up to you, Miguel. If you want to escalate your complaints, talk to 311. So 311 has the instruments for investigation inside the units, because what I'm experiencing is called intermittent noises during the night. So I'm glad to partner with No More Noises Toronto, and we are able to start a very interesting project with the use of this microphone that if you can see on the screen. This device is a standalone unit. It has a micro SD card. It has a power source. It can run up to a month. It can collect data, and this data can be available with the use of the software that will register the decibel levels. You know, some sound levels can be harmful for your health. Currently, I cannot hear well from my right ear. I got a severe infection in December. Due to I'm unable to sleep at night. My hours of sleep have been affected by these noises. So this is my current situation at my residence. I'm sleeping at the bottom of the stairs in my building. This is what I am able to cope with the noises at the nighttime. This is a rich city. They don't tell me you don't have solutions. I'm here to explain to you that if you're able to allow the MLSC to put these devices in units that are experiencing internal noises, they were able to validate what I've been saying since September 27, that the noises are here in my bedroom are intermittent, meaning that it happens every 30 minutes, every 40 minutes. And the worst part is that none of the officers want to stay in the unit and to listen to the noises, because they say they had to go to another building to investigate complaints, and they can stay in the unit to hear the noises. So this device will record the decibels and have a data sheet that will show that, yes, I am experiencing health problems because I'm not able to sleep at night. In conclusion, thank you so much for the opportunity to speak, and I hope you have a good conversations.
Thank you, Miguel. Are there any questions for the speaker? Thank you for joining us.
You're welcome.
Okay, I understand that we have So I'll ask if we have questions of staff on this report. So I'll ask one briefly. The Key Metrics report offers us a comparison of outcomes or services or service requests between this year and last year. Not that I'm asking for it today, but could 311 handle a question about, how does it stack up year over year over year in terms of the trends? How far can you go back with respect to your data?
Chair, so we can provide trend information. I think it goes back as 2009. That would be the data in the BI that we could pull from.
Okay, and that transcends, stark changes during the COVID pandemic, but it goes back before that time. Are you able to handle reports which deal with the changes of wards and geography in the city? Because all the way back to 2008, we weren't exactly the same wards year over year. So you have that ability to analyze.
Chair, we'd have to take that one back to see what's possible.
Okay. And the last piece, and I know it's come up during the meetings, but your annual report, you haven't necessarily measured things back against, or maybe you have measured it back against the service level that was anticipated, but maybe we could just take a moment to understand what 311 can provide through some of its reporting, encapsulated in the annual report. Back to that question of, we can learn a lot about the ebbs and flows of the questions and the requests that come to the city through the gateway of 311 in its various forms. But how do we go the step further in looking at or investigating what we did once we received those and what the outcomes were? Is 311 able to, with some work and with the right requests, take that deeper look?
Chair, so we can certainly take that back. We would have to work with the integrated service divisions. So as part of the Closing the Loop initiative, as an example, we are starting to look at, so while we do the intake, then send the request to the division actions, and what we can start to look and actually have started to look at is when they close or trigger the close for the service request, the types of notes that come back, as an example. Because sometimes that will generate questions from the person that's originally reported the service request. So those are things that we have started to look at with the divisions in terms of how can we make sure we do close the loop with the customer in terms of fulfillment and the information that we provide back to the customer when that service request is marked as fulfilled.
Okay. Some of the other things that we can ask to look at through you, do I understand this correctly? Services and services categories aside, can we look deeper into what are people calling us and asking us about? What is the information requests that we're getting and how has that changed over time? Is that something that you can query now and provide information back to? We don't even have to go through the committee. I guess as a counselor, I could call you and say, what are the trends? Is that correct?
Chair, so you're talking about like general inquiries?
Yeah, what did people ask about?
Yes, so we do track those articles and how many times we've tagged a particular question. So we can certainly take that back and provide reporting around those as well.
And the final piece is maybe you can tell me about how we will look at this in the future, but I think everyone understands that the largest channel in which you're accessed is telephone. People call in. And that can be a very easy experience, or it can be frustrating if I was to call during a really busy time, like following a snowstorm. But those numbers are changing, right? There are more people going through online. There are more people going through the app, and the call proportion is falling. If the committee wanted to pay attention to those changes and those trends, what are the questions that we should be asking about, or what are the types of information that you can offer to us so that we can ultimately help create a better customer experience so that people aren't on hold for 2 hours? I'm exaggerating, but on hold for a very long time.
So if I understand correctly, how do we use that data around the channel information to make sure we're providing an optimal experience?
Or improving.
Or improving. So we are starting to look at that data now. That's one of the reasons we actually want to promote and drive self-service adoption so that we can empower the public to send in requests on their own through the self-service channel. But we also recognize in doing that, we also need to make that an optimal experience, an easy experience, a simple experience for the public. And those are part of the initiatives that we are looking at in 2025 to provide incremental updates so that when you are going to the portal to submit a service request, it is easy, and it's as easy as calling an agent, for example.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Seeing none, are there members wishing to speak on this item?
I'll just speak, having the largest number of 311 requests in the city, but for wildlife. So I also think this is a really great little chart that's in this report, the metrics, because it is, there's not injured wildlife everywhere as the top number. Where are the bins being damaged most? I'd really like to hear why. And is there a difference between the 4 divisions, 1, 2, 3, and 4, for bin damage? Not everybody wants their trees trimmed. So there's certain areas of the city that have more trees than others. How's that going? It's pretty interesting when you get down to the granular data, Chair. And I'm just not sure. I'm quite surprised to see the injured wildlife at the degree that it is. So some of this is, I don't know how we translate that back to the committees that oversee that, but that's a lot of dead and injured animals. What's the trend? Are they coyotes? Are they other things? Why? Anything going on with animals in the city we need to know about? That's just triggering those patterns for me. And not many potholes are not in the top 5 here, but the sewer line's blocked. Are there areas of the city that's happening in? Ward 2. I don't know where you are on that, Chair. I can just check for that. You actually only have, that's not your top problem, according to here, for your people. No. And the other thing is, are there certain times of year when these things are? And I just think I just don't understand how some of this data is used divisionally, because it's great data, and how it gets translated so that whether it's the general manager or somebody that does data is saying, okay, this is trending in Etobicoke, York. We've got a lot of X, or this is all happening at this point. Yes, there was flooding. We understand that. What are all these animals dying from in certain parts of the city? That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other members wishing to speak?
And I'm very proud to have 28,000 311 calls.
All right. So I'm happy to move the recommendation, which is to receive the report for information, and that is not to say that there isn't value in this. But we'll vote on that. All those in favor? Any opposed? That carries. On to our third, but item number 2. That is public reporting of performance and service standards. We do have 2 speakers. Our first speaker is Omo Lay from the Adasa Advocacy.
Mr. Chair, on a point of order.
Point of order.
Councillor Ainsley?
Yes.
Sorry, before we dive into this, I just wanted to quickly give some context for my letter. I originally submitted this letter to the General Government Committee with 4 recommendations. And the city clerk, because our committee impacts on so many different areas, the clerk actually advised me to break the recommendations up so that 2 of them are here before us in the Service Excellence Committee. 1 we dealt with the General Government Committee, Mr. Chair, that you and I both sit on the other day. And then the final one is going to Executive Committee. So the one at General Government asked for a report back on progress in meeting the December 25th launch. The two before us today are directing the division to provide information and for customer experience to do the analysis and start the ongoing reporting. And then the last one had a budget implication. So I was directed that that had to go to the executive committee. So that's kind of just a bit of context about why these motions are here before us today. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome to our first speaker, Omole. You have 5 minutes. Please begin as soon as you're ready.
Oh, there we go. Okay. Good morning, Council. So verifying for the record, I am Matrock Omoko, Municipal Speaker of Adasa Advocacy. So source reports referenced today for item SE 7.2, public reporting of service performance and service standards, will be the City of Toronto Environmental, Social and Governance Report for Action Summary 2025, a social development strategy for the City of Toronto 2001. That's the second report. So, Council, despite there being almost 25 years in internal recognition of the City of Toronto's divisional needs, transparency, accountability, participation, responsiveness, progressive measurement, and leadership still seems to be at the request of the clients and the guests to this inner city experience. It seems as though such traits of good governance continue to remain a political ailment only to the incentivized workers to appeal to future investors with kid-friendly infographics with poor statements of summary findings. What color pie chart will get provincial leaders to take interest in the ethics of municipal leadership from a budgetary standpoint? $14 million has been allocated to 4 key players in representing polyeconomic responsibility. Why is it that such a number is being highlighted in the Chief Treasury, but reduced to the annual complaints of commuter ridership in the Chief Budget's e-blasts? The average resident doesn't need to be reminded that transit users fare evade. They want to know how Ontario's next Wayne Gretzky will feel should a fare inspector notice and treat him as though he is Rosa Parks. Council, it is sad to say, but numbers reflect outcomes. And if the Service Excellence Committee wants to beautify the image of City of Toronto, first it needs to beautify its actions and improve services. Stop functioning social disparity. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions of the speaker? Seeing none, thank you for joining us. Our next speaker is Ingrid Boudet. Is Ingrid here or online?
Hello, I'm online.
Welcome. We can hear you well. Please begin as soon as you're ready.
Okay, I'm just going to get to sharing my screen. Thank you so much. Can I please have sharing privileges? Give that another try.
The clerks are working on it. They should be there in a moment.
Absolutely.
There you go.
Okay.
So we
Excellent.
can see,
I'm going to keep it. Great. I'm going to keep it in this mode because it seems to be easier this way. So good morning, everyone. Thank you for allowing me to speak on SE 7.2, Public Reporting of Performance and Service Standards. My name is Ingrid Boudet, and I am founder of No More Noise Toronto. We are focused on noises that wake us up, keep us up, and disturb us day and night. We're grassroots, grown to over 1,550 supporters. We're data and process oriented. And as you can see, we're engaged in the civic process at City Hall. We're thankful to have had many conversations with city divisions, municipal licensing and standards, Toronto Police Services, Toronto Public Health, and Toronto at your service. It's lovely to see everyone today. We're also lucky to be collaborating with a number of other organizations in Toronto. So I'd like to thank you and this committee for your pursuit of excellence. It's right in your name, and for looking to democratize data and sharing the city's information with the public. Doing this right will enhance public trust, and an example of that is the temporary and occasional liquor license applications map that I believe Councillor Ainsley advocated for the night economy. So this is a great example of sharing information and giving people what they need in a format that they can consume it. So the topic for today is about publicly reporting data and user-friendly public dashboards and enhancing public trust. So in looking at the annual report, Councillor Fletcher already mentioned a number of these numbers here, and everyone else has, which basically comes to I'm just going to say 6% of the updates of those service. So I'll back up. 1.29 million interactions, 32% or 412,800 were service requests. 6% were asked for updates of those service requests, which makes for 24,768 requests for updates. That's a lot of work for 311. In the graphs, the red is waste collection, but the orange is municipal licensing and standards, and that's what I want to touch on today. So as Councillor Fletcher mentioned, seems to be a lot of dead wildlife and injured wildlife, but I do want to draw your attention to the fourth bar, which is amplified sound or instrument sound, 8,349 reports. I don't think that's the whole story. And so I looked at the municipal licensing and standards noise service standards, and this is a screenshot from the website. All of these have number of days for a response, except for noise. There is no response time for noise. So if the item poses a health risk, such as improper heating, there's a 24-hour response time. For wildlife issues, it's 2 hours, but there's no SLA for noise, and I believe this has to be addressed because there's a gap. Service isn't just about having SLAs and meeting those targets. Service excellence is about reducing the number of service requests and improving enforcement mechanisms to reduce or predict response times. People who are subjected to unnecessary and harmful noise have nowhere else to turn. 311 is it. And so with no SLA, there will be no data to present to the public. And so this will not increase trust in the city for No More Noise Toronto members. So what's been said, lucky enough to have conversations with municipal licensing and standards, and Carlton Grant was opened up a webinar that we had together, and he said noise is number one of the top 5 complaints. 18,000 complaints annually come into their office. Noise is 10% of their workload, and noise is the most challenging and complex part of municipal licensing and standards job. I believe some of those updates for service requests are for noise. So when you want to, service request is the input and the service level agreement is the output. And if there's not reporting, then you're not going to have a good output. And so the reporting process needs to be improved. Right now it's very difficult and the wording is confusing, such as waste collection is under permitted or exempted noise. People aren't going to find that. And we want them to find that because that's how we're going to fix overnight waste collection. So if the problem in creating an SLA is the investigation process, then that needs to be improved. So reports are not being made. So the numbers in the 311 reporting are not representative of the problem, including the amplified sound level. So as an example, here's the current amplified sound enforcement process. And on the top row here, you can see where the business operator keeps on going, but the resident experience, there's lots of question marks. There's lots of people that have to come and go. There's 2 measurements that need to be taken. And finally, there's no permanent change. We don't know what happens. And the beat goes on all night. My proposed suggestion is area sound level monitoring, where you just have these monitors that are on light posts, so they have power, they can broadcast the sound levels via Wi-Fi. That goes directly to MLS, and then they can act on it accordingly. This reduces the need for residents to get involved, and also it would improve enforcement. And the ambient and loud measurements can be obtained without visiting the site and without disturbing residents. So finally, my recommendations is fix the processes for everyone's benefit. Help people know what the process is for enforcement. Right now, they don't know, so they don't report. Utilize technology to streamline the workflows, establish service level agreements for noise-related service requests. So please remember that everyone is impacted by noise, whether they are aware of it or not, or annoyed of it or not. We can't close our ears. Our bodies can't stop listening. Noise is a health issue, a climate issue, and an equity issue. So let's create a better Toronto by reducing noise. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Are there any questions of the speaker? Seeing none, thank you for joining us, Ingrid.
Thank you.
And I hope the clerks have a copy of that presentation.
You will be getting one shortly.
All right. Thank you very much. Are there questions of staff on this report? Excuse me, on Councillor Ainsley's item? I'm going to take an opportunity to ask one, but Councillor, did you want to go ahead?
I'm just happy to move the recommendations.
Okay. I'll ask one, and because I think it's important context. Maybe I'll ask two. So I'm very intrigued on how we do against what our service standards are, but I admit that I don't know what all the standards are, at least off the top of my head. I know how I can look those up, and I think it's because there are several hundred of them. So from 311's perspective, how many standards do we have? Maybe how many categories of service do we have, and how many standards do we have?
So, Chair, we have just under 600 services that we can provide intake for. So each one of those services would have an associated service standard.
My understanding is through our budget process, and I know that there's a budget note on it, there's something called service levels, and they're very similar to the service standards. They're charted out. The city does this, it expects this, and I think in the budget note it says how we did. Could someone offer any context about how many services there are in that set of tables or that set of tracking? Doesn't have to be an exact number, but just a sense.
To you, Chair, yeah, similarly, there are many service levels that are reported as part of the budget. So I think, staff have discussed our work, if these recommendations are adopted, that really look at how we can better communicate to council and to the public about how the city defines all these measures, and how we have established them related to service delivery. So I think that would be part of that work.
What's the difference between the two, or is there one?
I think that, they are used in many ways in a similar way to overall outline the expectations, right, for timelines and responsiveness of services that are provided to the public.
Would adopting the recommendations from Councillor Ainsley help to bring those together into something that is codified in a way that the various systems work together? So there's not a conflict.
Yeah, it does, yes.
Okay, so knowing that there's several hundred of each of them, would it be helpful to suggest that you start somewhere, knowing that if we asked you to go do 500 or 600, it might take you a really long time to come back with a report?
Yes, that would certainly help us scope and prioritize in terms of the starting point.
So if I asked you to do that, could staff find a way to choose ones which are topically sensitive, but also representative of the organization?
Yes, we can do that.
So, in other words, if I asked for it last week, they would be all standards to transportation services because of the snowstorm, but I don't think that's fair. It would be something more reflective of the breadth of the city.
We can do that, and I think as part of that, we can come back with how, the rationale of how we sort of suggest focusing in on those first. What were the criteria that were used to make that recommendation?
Are there any other questions of staff? Seeing none. Members wishing to speak, Councillor Ainsley, I'll offer you if you want to go first or second. I did want to present a small amendment.
Yeah, no, I'm fine. I think my motion pretty self-explanatory, and I've seen your motion, and I support the text of that as well. And I hope I can have the support of the rest of our committee. And I look forward to seeing the results of the work. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other members wishing to speak before I do? Great. So I'll take a moment. Mr. Clerk, could you put my motion on the screen? So my motion is just an amend additional, just knowing that this is quite a large volume of very important work that we're going to be asking the staff. I'd like to see results come back as quick as possible, and my suggestion is if we can focus in on, as those I suggested in my questions, ones that are both topically sensitive and representative of the city, but if staff could come back with an initial list knowing that we really want to grow the list over time. And hopefully that's constructive and helpful to the committee and to those tasked with the report. So I hope you'll support that. Great. So on the amendment, all those in favor? That carries. On the item as amended, all those in favor? That carries. Mr. Clerk, I'll check with you if that is all items of business. I get the nod. Thank you very much, everybody, for a successful committee. The meeting is adjourned.
Have a great weekend, everyone.